Well, we'll start here this morning with the transition from the overnight IR to the visible satellite as sun rises, and we're starting to see a little bit of activity up here in Minnesota. But the main game for today is all throughout this area here for severe weather. Let's take a look at the players here at 500 millibars. So we have just kind of a broad flow out of the southwest with favorable shear to support supercells in a few different locations. And we have little disturbances. The main one is actually this entire trough. Then we have little short waves like this one here and another one here, and then little ripples in the flow here. This is very interesting and kind of hard to diagnose sometimes. But let me show you what the forecast is from the Storm Prediction Center for today, Friday. So we have a level 3. And this has been common. This is the enhanced risk. We've had 4 or 5 of these so far this year, running from central Wisconsin down into Illinois and then curving back down to northern Oklahoma with a slight risk surrounding that. That's the yellow. And then, of course, the one surrounding that, just kind of embedded one in another. Take a look at the tornado risk here, and I'll come back to a more detailed graphic of this in a second. But there's a 10% chance of a tornado within a 25-mile circle up here from eastern Iowa through a small sliver of Illinois right into the heart of Wisconsin with a 5% surrounding that, and encompassing this area down here. And you can tell by the way they draw this that this is dry line activity expected here. There's also another hot spot that could be there. There could be some pre-funnel storms there and pre-funnel storms here too. And we'll take a look at all that in a second. I did want to show you a NATOcast. It didn't really emphasize the Wisconsin portion of this as much as it did down here in south central Kansas and into northwest Oklahoma, where that hatching indicates a 10% chance of an EF2 or greater. So I found that to be very interesting. Let's dive into this a little bit more. So SPC has their own product. I'll just rehash the intensity levels here. So the green is 2. Actually, this is percentage chance. I'm saying it's intensity because the next slide will show that. But you can see these are the levels I outlined a few slides ago. Now I want to overlay on top of this the new SPC intensity approximations. So how significant will the tornadoes be given the percentage chance underlaying that they'll actually be there? So in other words, if you just look here, EF0, EF1, EF2, you can kind of see for this first black line, the thinner one, we're looking at lower percentages basically of the higher level tornadoes. So here you only have 5% chance of an EF3, 1% chance of an EF4 or greater. On the EF2 scale, which is that NATOcast, that was 14%. So that covers almost all of the 5% risk area. Up in the 10% risk area, we have the next level. So you'll notice there's a slightly bigger chance for an EF4, slightly bigger chance for an EF3, slightly bigger chance for an EF2, and so on. So, and these percentages actually diminish a little bit. So that just kind of gives you an idea where the SPC thinks that more significant tornadoes will develop. I'm still kind of watching this area, though, like I said, and then also some pre-funnel stuff, and I'll show you some radar images in a minute. There's also a hail risk, 30% chance of severe hail, which is 1 inch in diameter or greater, up in this corridor here, and down here where thunderstorms are expected to develop both ahead of the actual cold front, which is pretty significant, and along it too. And then we do have a pretty big wind risk. This is as the squall line develops further this evening, and it will be shaped something like this by about mid-evening. So we have a huge 45% risk of severe wind gusts over 59 miles an hour in that area as well. Maybe some more isolated areas were more than that. Take a look at the CSU outlook. They are still emphasizing the tornado risk to be pretty high, 15% through that same area of western Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, and western Illinois. It's a small but pretty significant area. Then we have this, again, this kind of lobe down here. Notice that the hail intensity is pretty high, 40%, 45% chance with significant hail down in western Oklahoma. And then the wind risk becomes along this squall line, which does extend down into Missouri and maybe by default, maybe down into eastern Kansas too. Let's take a look at the 500 millibar wind flow forecast for noon today. It's just a broad brush forecast flow here, and the key to seeing which of these tornadoes might, achieve tornado intensity, or which of these storms might achieve tornado intensity is knowing where these little short waves are. Here it looks pretty benign, but if you look at the wind field, you definitely see maximum areas in different places. So even though the curvature may not show up, the little short waves may still be there. Cape is all across the board forecast to be very good, very intense. From Iowa all the way down to the dry line and out ahead of it as well. One thing that you want to look out for low-level rotation and tornado potential is the 0 to 1 kilometer, or in other words, right down by the surface, storm relative helicity. How much spinning will a storm ingest in its lower part? And you can see why up here in Iowa that risk for tornadoes is there. I also want to point out, though, it might be remote, but at noon already, we're already seeing some values here of some significance in eastern Kansas. So I'm going to chase today. What I'll probably do is leave Springfield, go out to this area and hang out right around this time, just in case I miss some prefrontal activities. Some of the models are showing it. That would quickly move this way. This is actually not bad. Chase territory, but then it degrades if you start getting into central Missouri. And then I probably would focus my attention more out here. Let's take a look at some of those radar simulations, and they're just that. They can be pretty close sometimes. So already by noon, this is sort of breaking out early. Some of these potential supercells in eastern Iowa will be contributing to that tornado threat up there. 2 hours later, we get again, see this activity here and here is prefrontal, and I just don't know where those are going. So I'm just kind of keeping my eye out for that. This is 2 o'clock. Notice up in Wisconsin we have some cells. I'm going to switch views real quick so you can see the northern part of that. So we have interesting little Boeing segments developing, and then possibly some isolated supercells. If it's a supercell, it has usually a snail trail of mid-level helicity or updraft rotation. You can see one right there, and maybe another one down in here somewhere. Then we'll go 2 hours later to 4, switch back our view to the Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma theater, if you will. And here's some interesting activity. Here you see the snail trails of some pretty good supercells developing. But the problem is on some of these, you're going to have to be watching out because they're going to be overtaken by the cold front pretty quick, and they will lose their intensity. So the trick is to find cells perhaps like these, maybe around the triple point, that can survive just a little bit longer. And like most storm chasings, the window is very narrow. By 6 p.m., still light, we have a squall line forming south of Kansas City. Could be some embedded circulations in that, tornado risk there. Also, a lot of evidence of supercells down here in that area. And then by 8 p.m., this is descending upon the Ozarks. So again, there's an isolated severe wind risk along Boeing segments like perhaps this one. Maybe a tornado risk with that as well, certainly down here in north central Oklahoma. And then finally by 10 p.m., notice, and this is common for the Ozarks, when these squall lines develop, we usually get this kind of built-up area right here. It almost always forms, and it puts this area of southwest Missouri under a little bit extra risk, and that could last till Springfield. I'm not quite sure, but there is a front in here. This might shut it down, so it just depends on exactly how all that lines up at 10 o'clock. And then I did want to cover a couple more things. On Saturday, there is a severe thunderstorm risk for parts of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, including Pittsburgh, Columbus, Cleveland, and Charleston, West Virginia. A little bit of a tornado risk with that is on the northern end of that risk area. Pittsburgh on to Buffalo. And then it gets really quiet for many days here. Saturday's severe weather outlook doesn't really highlight tornadoes a whole lot, or any of it really. And then I just wanted to comment, we have to go all the way to Wednesday before any kind of severe weather risk starts showing up on the CSU outlook, and that would continue on into Thursday in the northern plains, it looks like. And then finally, NIU sums up the next 7 days, but in particular, the most, really just today and tomorrow. And then after that, April 24th through the 30th, Texas becomes a hot spot, but could be some instability riding up northward. And then finally, the first week of May, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, straight west through Texas, and maybe getting up into Oklahoma. Thanks for watching today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. This is published every day after the morning Storm Prediction Center update. Also, remember to check that site off on day 1 because they update it fairly frequently. If you like this video, please like it. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.